Good morning and welcome in on a perfect college football Saturday in Columbia, Missouri. I am Gabe DeArmond with PowerMizzou.com. This is the pregame call brought to you by Call and Gentry Law Group. We will be with you up until just a few minutes before kickoff of Missouri and Texas A&M. And that is at 11 a.m. on the SEC Network. About 90 minutes away. Again, we will take you up to, 15, 20 minutes away from kickoff, something like that. We will preview every angle of this game. We'll take your comments, your questions, all that. Anything you guys want to talk about related to the Tigers and Aggies, the SEC, whatever it may be. I've already discovered my first error of the day. We have an 11 a.m. kickoff, not a 3 p.m. kickoff. So there you go. It is fixed. 11 a.m. on the SEC Network. Before we get into the show, do want to just give you a heads up about Call and Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City, Missouri. They can do just about anything you guys need. The team down there, Nick, Chip, Emily, Jason, they can take care of contract law, personal injury, wrongful death, business law, whatever you need, they can get it done. There are a couple ways to contact them. You can go online at callgentry.com. You can actually schedule a consultation online right there on their website. You can also give them a call at 573-691-4571 if you want to call them for any legal question you have. I'm sure that they can help you out. The one thing they might not be able to help you out with is who abducted Missouri's defense 6 weeks ago and has yet to return it to Faurot Field, or for that matter, anywhere else that the Tigers have played. Missouri hoping for the answer to that today, hoping to get that defense returned against what I can only describe as a team that in a matter of 4 hours last Saturday night completely flipped the narrative on what it has been this season. Texas A&M went into the game against Alabama at 3-2 on the season. They had beaten Kent State, Colorado, and New Mexico. They had then lost their first two SEC games to Arkansas and Mississippi State. Average score of those games were 26-16. They hadn't really been competitive against Arkansas despite losing just 20-10. They had been competitive against Mississippi State but got beat by Mike Leach's crew 26-22. That game was in College Station. In fact, they haven't played a true road game yet. They've played 4 home games and 2 neutral site games. They played Colorado and Denver. Is that a neutral site game? Not exactly, but it counted as one. Then they played Arkansas in Jerry World. Their other 4 games had been at home. But before last Saturday, A&M was 3-2. They had preseason been ranked in the top 10, maybe in the top 5. I should have looked that up and didn't. But they were widely viewed as the biggest threat to Alabama and Georgia in the SEC, as a team that maybe should have made the college football playoff last year and certainly was going to have an excellent shot this year. Starting quarterback Haynes King got hurt early on in week 2. He was replaced by Zach Calzada, a guy who Texas A&M fans wanted to run out of College Station on the first mode of transportation available. And then on Saturday night, Texas A&M beat Alabama 41-38. They took a huge lead. Bama came back and actually went ahead, and then A&M rebounded. And they won that game in front of a wild crowd in College Station. It was certainly one of the best scenes in college football this year. And A&M deserves every bit of credit it has gotten since that game. However, A&M has been that team exactly once in 6 tries this year. A&M, some people say they have the best running back duo in the country. I don't really know whether I believe that, but that's what they're saying about Isaiah Spiller and then A-Chain, and his first name is slipping my mind right now. But here are Texas A&M's rushing stats in 6 games. Kent State, 42 carries, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns. Colorado, 29 carries, 98 yards, no touchdowns. New Mexico, 34 carries, 154 yards, 1 touchdown. Arkansas, 23 carries, 121 yards, 1 touchdown. Mississippi State, 32 for 161, 1 touchdown. Alabama, 27 for 94, 1 touchdown. So against Kent State, in the opener, Kent State's terrible. The Aggies ran 42 times for 303 yards and 2 touchdowns. In 5 games since then, A&M has run the ball 145 times for 628 yards and 4 touchdowns. They are basically averaging 145 divided by 5 is 29. They're averaging 29 carries for 125 yards and less than 1 touchdown a game. I'm sorry, but that does not scream best running game in the country to me, or best running backs in the country to me. It screams incredibly underwhelming offense who had a really good day against Kent State. What about the passing? What about Zach Calzada? Well, again, it is really a tale of one game. Well, let's go 2 games. Well, I'm not sure. Kent State, 21. Zach Calzada didn't play this game. This was Haynes King. 21 of 34, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nice line. 4 interceptions. Since then, 19 of 40 against Colorado, under 50%, 191 yards, 1 touchdown, passer rating of 95.8. Against New Mexico, another terrible team, 19 of 33, 275, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. That's a nice game. Arkansas, 20 of 36, 151 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick, passer rating of 85. Mississippi State, 12 of 20, they threw 20 passes, 135 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Now, last week against Alabama, Zach Calzada, 21 of 31, 285, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, one of the gutsiest performances all year. Nobody's going to say that Alabama doesn't have a good defense. They do. And Calzada deserves all kinds of credit for that. But in the 4 weeks before that, A&M was averaging less than 200 yards passing per game, had 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and a completion percentage a little bit over 50%. They had gone 70 for 129. So 53, 54%. Again, not a great passing game. It's a very average offense that Texas A&M brings in. Now, Missouri, a less than average defense, without question. If you need any further proof of that, North Texas was at home last night against Marshall. They trailed that game 42-7 at halftime and had about 100 yards in total offense. I think it was like 119. I don't even know what the final score ended up being because I quit paying attention at that point. But North Texas put up 35 and threw for 305 against Missouri last week. We understand that worse teams than A&M have looked all world offensively against Missouri. So I'm not saying A&M's going to come in here and only put up 10 points or something like that. That would be very out of the ordinary. But the reaction I've seen this week is, I don't get it. Why is A&M favored by 8, 9, 7.5, 10, whatever, somewhere in that 7 to 10 range, depending on when you look at it and which book you looked at. Well, the reason is because 5 out of 6 weeks, A&M hadn't really been very good. And the question I have, and I think it's very possible, is A&M going to come in here motivated and the same team it was last week? Or is A&M going to come in here a little bit fat and happy off beating Alabama and think they can roll the helmets out at 11 a.m. and win in Columbia? I think it's the latter. Now, that may be good enough because this is a average, below average, mediocre, whatever you want to call it, Missouri team. This is not a great Missouri team by any means. But if A&M comes in here that way, Ron kind of hits on what I think we might see in this game. And that is Eli Drinkwitz doing what he did last year against LSU and just saying, we're going to let it all hang out today. I said in my game prediction, this is the game where Eli Drinkwitz calls every play in his playbook and then makes up a few more on the sidelines. I think this is the one where Drinkwitz just says, look, this is our chance, guys. This is A&M turned its season last year, right? Or last week. I'm sorry. It flipped the narrative completely on the head. I think Missouri has the chance to do that today. Has the chance to take what has been anywhere from a slightly disappointing to completely underwhelming season. However you want to look at it on that spectrum, I don't really care. But it clearly has fallen short of hopes and expectations. But with a win today, that gives you a win over, I think A&M is now ranked again, a win over a ranked team, a 4-3 record, and a chance with a bye week coming up, then Vanderbilt, you got South Carolina left, a chance to get back to that 6-7 wins, get in a bowl game, and continue this positive momentum that Eli Drinkwitz had going. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Missouri's got a lot to prove. They haven't proven much this season. A&M proved a lot last week, but up until last week, hasn't really shown much of anything this year. This is still a team led by a backup quarterback with a questionable offensive line. Now, the A&M defense is another deal. A&M can play some defense. They've got one of the best defensive fronts in the country. We're going to talk to Olin Buchanan here in a few minutes. I'm going to play my interview with him from Thursday afternoon for you guys to get a little bit more insight into the Aggies on both sides of the football. But, look, I think this one's closer than most people are thinking it is, to be quite honest with you. I did not pick Missouri to win. I picked A&M 33-27. But I think this sets up for Missouri to have a chance. And, I want to, if you guys, I should have welcomed you to do this before, but if you've got comments, if you've got questions, please put them in the comment section. I'll throw them up on the screen like I did with Roberts right here, and we'll get to them before we talk to Olin. Robert says, I hope Drink gets these guys up. Maybe he should just give the Al Pacino speech from Any Given Sunday. If these guys can't get up, and that's Eli Drinkwitz's job, like he's held responsible for that. But if you can't get up for this game, this team that just beat the number one team in the country, a chance to turn your season around on a perfect day in front of what I would think should be a good crowd. If you can't get up for this game, you don't belong playing major minutes in major college football. Now, I'm not saying that means Missouri wins. Look, Missouri can come out and play very well. And if A&M plays very well, Missouri's going to get beat because A&M's a better team. But I think Robert hits on what you want to see. You want to see a team that looks like it is ready and wants to be there. And that is not something we've seen in the first quarter a lot this year, right? They've not against good competition. They fell behind Kentucky 14-0. I think they jumped out ahead of BC, led most of the first half. So that was decent. They never showed up against Tennessee. I mean, they just didn't show up the whole game. So 2 out of 3 games, we've seen a Missouri team come out of the gates and just look blah. And then even in that BC game, yes, they had a 17-14 lead, I think, at half. Midway through the third quarter, they were down 24-14. They came out of the locker room just dead. And so if you want to expand it, we're talking 4 out of 6 halves against FBS or against Power 5 competition. Missouri hadn't looked like it's been ready to go. So, yeah, I agree, Robert. This is a day that you want to see Eli Drinkwitz get his team ready. Stewart is on the optimistic side. Today's a great day for a Mizzou win. Tyler, also on the optimistic side, back from the deer stand, wanting an upset. Not everybody on the optimistic side. Jared, not super enthused about Missouri's chances in this game. That's fine. Totally understand somebody who is pessimistic about this one. That's how it goes. Stewart says we own A&M. That's not exactly true, right? Let me put these things back up here. Mizzou trails the all-time series 8-7. Now, given the reputation of A&M as a program and the reputation of Missouri as a program, you would think probably that number would be a little bit more lopsided. It isn't. because Missouri, especially in the Big 12 years, really did do very well in this series. I would argue that Missouri got R.C. Slocum fired at Texas A&M, which I think was a huge mistake by the Aggies. In the Big 12 years, coming into the Big 12, Texas A&M led this series 4-0, including a 73-0 domination in 1993. 1998, the Aggies won again. That was the Randy Potter fumbled punt game in College Station to take a 5-0 lead in the series. 99, they won 51-14 over Larry Smith's last team in Columbia. Aggies led the series 6-0. Since then, Mizzou won 33-27 and 0-2 in College Station. That's the game I argue got Slocum fired. They won 45-22 in Columbia the next year. Maybe that's the one that got Slocum fired. I don't know. It was right around there. They went down to College Station in 2006, the game where Will Franklin fumbled on the 1-yard line, and Missouri tried a really weird fake field goal. A&M won that one 25-19. Since then, Missouri 40-26 in 2007 with Chase Daniel at quarterback. Missouri 30-9 in College Station with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback in 2010. That's the one that I think got Mike Sherman fired. 2011, Missouri wins 38-31 in College Station. 2012, disappointing Missouri team, first year in the SEC. Johnny Manziel put 59 on them in College Station. That is A&M's only win over Missouri since 2006. In 2013, 28-21, the Henry Josie run, the SEC East title, the game you guys have all read about a lot this year or this week. And then in 2014, Missouri 34-27 in College Station. So overall, Missouri has won 5 out of 6 in this series and 7 out of 9 to make the all-time series 8-7. A&M certainly a favorite today, but Missouri has definitely held its own and more than held its own in this series in the last few tries. We are going to take a look around the SEC standings, games today, all that. We're going to talk to Mitchell Forty. We're going to take more of your comments and questions. We'll do all those things in a little bit, but as we do every week here, want to give you guys kind of a look at the opposing team from somebody who knows them better than I do. Talked a couple days ago with Olin Buchanan from TexAgs.com. They cover the Aggies very well, probably better than anyone. So check out our interview with Olin. It runs somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. We'll be back, kind of look around the SEC, take some more comments, check in with Mitchell Forty, and lead you up to kickoff right at 11 a.m. All right, welcome into which team is this? Because right now, Missouri fans are going, "Oh my God, we got to play the team that just beat Alabama." Now, the flip side of that is Texas A&M's only been that team once. The first 5 weeks of the season, they were in the conversation for like the country's most disappointing team. So, do you have any idea which one is kind of closer to the real A&M?
I don't. I guess we're going to find out over the next 6 or 7 weeks, right? Or 6 weeks. We thought coming into the season that you mentioned they were most disappointing. You wouldn't be disappointing unless, there were expectations, and there wouldn't be expectations if you didn't look like you should be a good football team. And I think what we saw against Alabama is a glimpse of what we thought we were going to see from Texas A&M this year. Now, their injuries have been a major part of their problems. They've had multiple injuries in the offensive line. They've had injuries in the secondary. Of course, their starting quarterback was lost for the year in the second, I guess, on the 6th play of the second game of the season. So that's been an issue, but that doesn't answer all the problems. So the Aggies have been up until last week a team that was, quite frankly, underachieving. And then they go out and not only do they beat Alabama, but for the most part, they dominated them on the line of scrimmage, rushed the passer well. They didn't run well, but they didn't give up they ran efficiently, but they didn't give up a lot of, they didn't give up any sacks at all. So again, you ask yourself, well, is that kind of an aberration to what the rest of the season is going to be? Or is that a confirmation of how good this team can be and where it's going.
Yeah. And kind of along the same lines. So Zach Calzada, now you correct me if I'm wrong. For about 4 weeks, there could not have been much more negativity towards Zach Calzada than what I saw from fans and even some media online. And then he comes out and plays. I mean, if Saturday night was the first college football game you'd watched all year, you'd say, well, I'm voting for Zach Calzada for Heisman. I mean, that was one of the more impressive performances I've seen.
It was mind-boggling.
Yeah.
He struggled when he came in against Colorado, but he was able to make a couple nice passes late and pull that game out. And then he played well against New Mexico, but it's New Mexico. Right. If you can't play well against New Mexico, you shouldn't be playing at this level. And then he was a struggle is a kind word to describe his performance against Arkansas when they still had a chance to win, and he threw an interception off his own center's helmet. And then, it's true. And then, he didn't play well at all against Mississippi State, even though he had one touchdown that was nicely thrown. But then he comes out, and he was the target of a lot of derision, a lot of criticism, scrutiny here. There are those that were already thinking, well, he'll be gone next year, and maybe they'll get a good quarterback coming in recruiting, and Haynes King will be healthy and already looking to next year. And quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of reasons to believe any different. And then he comes out and he completes his first 10 passes. He stays in against some pressure and delivers the ball on the mark. His one interception that he had was just a miscommunication between him and a receiver. So you couldn't put that completely on him. And then he finishes the half 14 of 13 with a couple of touchdowns. And that's against Alabama. So they hit that lull in the third quarter. They had only 10 plays, and they had, I think, 4 consecutive 3-and-outs. But when Alabama takes the lead, the guy comes out and he leads them right down the field for a game-tying touchdown when he gets hit and knocked down, and he never even sees the ball completed. And then he's kind of hurt, and he limps off the field, and they put him in the tent. They get the ball back. He comes back out, and he leads them downfield for the winning field goal. So there's, who is this Jekyll and Hyde type of guy? If that's Mr. Hyde, the Aggies hope that's, who he stays the rest of the year, no doubt.
Right. And I mean, that was the most miraculous injury recovery I've seen since Paul Pierce rode out in a wheelchair in the NBA finals. Right. He just got right back on the field and went down the field against the number 1 defense in the country. But so we've kind of ignored the main issue in this game, at least from Missouri's side, for the first 5 minutes. Look, the qualification for an offense to be good against Missouri this season has basically been this. Can your quarterback stay on his feet long enough to turn around and hand the ball off to legitimately anyone and then let them run? A&M, I know, has 2 talented tailbacks. The numbers aren't eye-popping. I mean, A&M's running for 155 yards a game. It's fine, but they are running for 6 yards a carry. And is that kind of the – Calzada aside, I've got to assume the recipe is just give the ball mostly to Isaiah Spiller and see how long he can go.
Yeah, I would think that would be the game plan, is to try to lean heavily on your running game. That's what they did last year to be successful. And you have Isaiah Spiller and you have Devon Achane, who might be the fastest player in college football. And that's not, overselling it. I mean, he went to the Olympic trials.
Right.
So I would think that's the way you want to come out and attack them. I know that I guess it's 3 players have had their career best running day against Missouri this year.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've watched every game. That seems low, but yeah, probably 3 is right.
So the guy from Boston College, Tennessee, and Kentucky, Christian Rodriguez. So when you see that, of course, you go in and you say, okay, this is how we got to attack. But then you also have to take a step back and say, yeah, despite that, Kentucky was right in the mix to win 2 of those games.
Mm-hmm.
So And Kentucky, I'm sorry, I said Kentucky, didn't I? I meant Missouri was right into the mix to win 2 of those games, one against Kentucky and one against Boston College. So I don't know that you can go in there and say, hey, we're just going to run on them because, well, if Missouri sells out against the run and is able to stall A&M at all, you could find yourself being that one team, that one-hit wonder that wins a big game and then doesn't show up the next week. And that's what they've got to guard against. So, yeah, it looks like that's the way you should attack Missouri. But I think Missouri knows that too.
Right.
And if they find a way to slow down A&M's running game, A&M could be in for a tough Saturday.
I know you mentioned injuries on the offensive line. I know that unit has been a little up and down, but more than the personnel, I wanted to ask you, the coach there is Josh Henson, who used to be Missouri's offensive coordinator. I don't know what your guys' access down there is to assistant coaches, and if anybody's had a chance to talk to him about coming back to Columbia or not. But what kind of job has Josh done down there?
It's good. Well, first of all, we don't get to talk to him at all. Yeah, Jimbo Fisher's from the Nick Saban school, so he's going to be the one voice.
I think everybody's from that school anymore, honestly.
Yeah. So most of them are. So, but I'll say this: 2 years ago, the general fan base, the fandom of A&M was calling for Josh Henson's job. They didn't have a good performance in the offensive line. Of course, they had a undersized center, and I think it all starts there because their starting center at that time, Ryan McCollum, got hurt and was out. And there was some terminology they were trying to figure out what he wanted, so they had issues. But then last year they had one of the 2 or 3 best offensive lines in the country. So the feeling for Josh changed 100%, did the complete 180. Now he's a great coach, everything. Well, they get off to a bad start this year. Of course, the guy they thought was going to be their center, Luke Matthews, bad shoulder. He hadn't played all year, and they have to put a true freshman center out there. Now he's a bad coach again. And then they go out and they move the ball pretty well against Alabama, and you got 2 true freshmen in there, and a guy making only his second start and at a new position in a trainer. That's how much he doesn't play. His name's Blake Trainer. I was having a hard enough time remembering his name. And they moved the ball against Alabama. Now suddenly Josh is a great coach again. You know how fans can be. But, I think he's a fine coach. I think he's done a good job here. He's just too often has had some obstacles that he's had to overcome. And, again, if their performance against Alabama is any indication, it looks like he's maybe overcome some more obstacles this year.
Yeah, well, hey, advice not just for Josh Henson, but for every coach: just have good players, man. Like, do that more, and you're going to be great at your job, right?
Yeah, good ones, and and if they're experienced, that also helps a lot. But he's got 2 true freshmen, like I said, in the starting lineup, and a guy, Blake Trainer, who's made 1 start against New Mexico at tackle. They moved him to guard, and he was much better at guard. So, maybe it's just a process of figuring out what you've got and getting those guys a little bit more experience, making them understand what you're looking for.
Flip sides of the ball, and the one thing that I don't think has been questioned at any point with this A&M team is that defensive line. Up there with some of the best in college football, I think. And hey, Alabama put some points up, but Alabama's gonna put some points up. Not many others have found any way to kind of solve this A&M defense. I mean, how good is that front?
The front is really good, I think. I think DeMarvin Leal is a potential first-round pick. I've seen him ranked as high as 3rd in those mock drafts for whatever that's worth. They move him around. They'll start him at the right defensive end. The left defensive end going against the right tackle. But they'll move him to the other side. And last week he started at inside at defensive tackle. So he's 295 pounds and moves really well, so he's big enough to play at tackle. At guard. Yes, at tackle. What am I saying? And maybe have more quickness and speed than a guard is used to blocking. So they look for, I think, wherever they think their best matchup is with him. And then Michael Clemons is a guy that's been in, and he's been up and down because of injuries in his career. Never has fulfilled his potential, but it looks like he is now. Big 6'5", 275-pound guy who was a high school running back and is really coming on. They've got some guys that can rush the passer and on the end, and they're solid inside as well. They've had some problems against the run. A lot of it goes back to what has been some mediocre linebacker play. They're trying to get that figured out. But for the most part, their defensive line has been pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. Is there a weakness on this defense, or maybe an area that they go into games not quite as sure of?
Well, I mentioned the linebackers, and quite frankly, I think you even have to look at the secondary. Yeah. They've got Miles Jones. He was a returning starter at cornerback, a super senior. Has a foot problem, had to have surgery. He's out for the year. His backup, Brian George, had a knee injury. He's out for the year. So they've got a true freshman, Tyreek Chappelle, playing at one corner. Jalen Jones, who I thought and I still think is going to be a great player here as a second-year corner. He's kind of been up and down this year. Quite frankly, the safeties have been pretty good. I'll give them that. And quite frankly, I think the best guy in the secondary is Antonio Johnson, a second-year player out of East St. Louis, Illinois. So I'm sure he's going to be really excited to play this game. But I think the secondary's been kind of up and down. You know, you see it happen against Alabama, and you go, well, you know, like you said, it's Alabama. That's John Mechie out there. But they also had some trouble against Mississippi State. Well, of course, you'd say, well, that's Mike Leach's offense, and they were trying to play 8 back, and they were playing too far back. Okay, fine. But then KJ Jefferson lit them up too. He only completed like 7 passes, but 2 of them were long touchdowns. So I think you look at the secondary and you say that's an area that if your opponent has a quarterback who's an accomplished passer, you have to be a little bit concerned. And what do you know? The guy this week is an accomplished passer.
Yeah, Connor Bazelak, he's put up a lot of numbers. Now, Missouri's been playing from behind, but literally everything Missouri does on offense goes through Tyler Beatty. In talking to Jimbo or A&M's defensive players, kind of have they said much about Beatty this week and what they see in him?
Just the typical things. You know, he's a really good running back. He's the players call him great, and he's going to give you problems. You know, the thing that the typical Monday morning conversation. Now, as I do my research, I noticed that he's over 200 yards against North Texas and over 200 yards against Central Michigan, was it?
I think.
But I think he was limited to just over 100 yards in 2 games, 2 SEC games. That tells me, without seeing, I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on Missouri. I've only seen Missouri in highlights. But that tells me that he's a guy who's very capable of taking advantage of opportunities when they're there, but maybe the offensive line's having some trouble in SEC games creating space for him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair categorization. I mean, Beatty, he makes a lot of guys miss. He gets a lot of yards on his own, but Missouri's offensive line doesn't have a ton of talent. They've been up and down this year. You mentioned Antonio Johnson. There's another guy from St. Louis that actually was committed to Missouri at one point, Antonio Doyle, who I don't think is playing a ton. But I just wondered for our viewers, I mean, I know those are 2 kids they followed in high school. If you can kind of give our viewers and listeners an idea how those kids are doing down there.
Well, I know they really like Antonio Doyle. I think he's probably a year away from playing a lot. But, you know, you look at the guy, you know, he definitely looks like what you want from an SEC inside linebacker, you know, big, tough kid that as he learns the position and understands everything he has to do and it gets even bigger, the guy that can step into a hole and the play ends at contact. And I don't even know that A&M has that right now. Aaron Hansford was a good outside linebacker who's moved inside, and he has great speed. and he's getting better. But they've missed Buddy Johnson, the guy who was their inside linebacker last year, is now playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think Antonio Johnson. I'm sorry, I get them mixed up all the time. I do that. Antonio Doyle is a guy that they have a lot of plans for in the future. I think Antonio Johnson's the guy that came in, and even last year, like midway through the season, they're going, "Oh, holy cow! We knew this guy was good, but we didn't think he'd be this good this fast." And then so he was a productive backup. Had a big game against Mississippi State last year. Was whenever something was going wrong, he was for Mississippi State. He was always right in the middle of it. This year he came in and just flat won the job. And I think if he continues to play like he's playing and progresses, in a couple of years, and you always say a couple of years, might be next year,
right,
he may leave here, and people talk about him, one of the better defensive backs they've had in, the last couple of decades. I mean, he's really playing well. He leads the team in tackles, great on blitzes. He's such a long guy and he can come in fast. He had a nice block pass in the Sugar Bowl. You might have saw that against Sam Howell. I mean, he's a really good player. I think with those two guys are going to make Jimbo Fisher's staff take a lot of trips to Missouri and see if there's any more like them.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so I'm not huge on predictions because all they do is set us up to make us look stupid. But I've said, look, if A&M plays an A game, probably even a B game, they're going to walk out of here with a win. I think Missouri needs A&M to come over feeling pretty good about itself, right? Having read some press clippings, have a little bit of a hangover. But if you're looking at this from the A&M perspective, like, how's Missouri give itself a shot in the fourth quarter? What are the couple areas where you say, okay, this is what needs to happen for Missouri to have a shot in this?
Run effectively with Beatty and set up Bazelak where he's not in any obvious passing situations, or at least minimize the passing situations and the obvious ones, and play good run defense, sound run defense, because A&M's going to want to do that. And then of course you go back to the old coach speak: limit your mistakes, no turnovers, penalties. But I'm going to tell you, A&M is obviously good enough to beat anybody on their schedule. They beat Alabama. But I really don't think they're good enough to take any team for granted. I don't think they can go into Columbia, Missouri, or Columbia, South Carolina, for that matter. Of course, they're not going there this year. But I don't think there's anywhere they can go and say, okay, Prairie View, and say, all right, we're going to win this game no matter what. I don't think they're that talented or at that experience to be able to do that. Now, are they getting better? Apparently. But I guarantee you what the message that Jimbo Fisher is telling his guys is, don't look at the numbers as far as what they're giving up. Look at that game against Kentucky, the probably the third best team in the SEC East, and Kentucky had to scratch out a win. And they're going to say, look at that game against Boston College, which I think is one of the better teams in the ACC for whatever that's worth.
Right.
And say, look,
means, but
they had a chance to win that game. So I think that's what he's going to try to use to get their attention.
All right, that was my chat with Olin Buchanan from Tex Ags earlier this week about A&M, and he brought up kind of an interesting point there at the end, talking about Jimbo Fisher's message to his team this week. I've heard 2 or 3 coaches this week make the comment that the toughest coaching job you have is the week after your team wins a huge game. Which, I mean, A&M had been pointing to that Alabama game for 12 months. That was the one. Jimbo Fisher said over the summer, when they come here, we're going to whip their ass, right? That was A&M's season. Now, it had lost some of the luster because they had lost to Arkansas and to Mississippi State the previous 2 weeks. But that was still, that one, it took no motivation to get up for that one. That was Alabama. That was the team really that kept you out of the playoff last year. That was the roadblock for A&M to get where people in College Station think A&M should be regularly. So that game, Jimbo Fisher didn't have to do anything to get his team going for that one. But this game, on the road, 11 a.m., a 3-3 football team that has 0-2 in the SEC, hasn't really shown much in this conference to this point. This one's tougher. You can't just tell your kids, hey, look across the line of scrimmage or look across the field and have them be self-motivated. That's not going to happen in this game. So this is the week Jimbo Fisher's got to figure out a way to get his guys up. And again, to be honest, they haven't done a very good job of that this year until last week. You know, going to Denver to play Colorado, like they limped by 10-7. Going to Dallas to face Arkansas in what should be like a rivalry game, they had nothing for Barry Odom's defense. Got beat 20-10. Mississippi State coming into College Station after a loss, like that should be one that A&M's up for. They got beat 26-22. So this one, I think this is in some ways a much bigger test for A&M than it is Missouri. Missouri got nothing to lose. They're playing with house money. A&M has to prove to America that they're closer to the team that everybody saw last week than the team that everybody saw in the first 5 weeks of the season. We always kind of take a look at the matchups and the numbers here. So this was interesting to me. When I looked at it, especially after last week, you just had this idea of what A&M is, and it's just not true. Missouri is gaining 90 yards more per game. They're running 8 more plays. This is not a quickly operating Texas A&M team. They are a little bit plodding. 63 points a game, right? Or I'm sorry, 63 plays a game. Again, those rushing numbers, 155 yards a game, and more than 300 of those, basically 2 games worth, were against Kent State in the opener. Twice in 5 games, A&M has failed to run for 100 yards. Outside of that Kent State game, they're averaging about 126 yards a game on the ground. It's just nothing special. Missouri is throwing for more yardage a game, and they've turned it over half as much. In 6 games, Missouri has 5 turnovers. A&M's got 10. So those numbers all kind of favor Missouri. Now, the numbers that don't favor Missouri come on the other side of the ball. Texas A&M tied for 17th in the country in scoring defense at 16.8 points per game. By the way, the team they are tied with is Boston College. Texas A&M in total defense is actually not as good as you'd think. They're 53rd in the country, giving up 353 yards a game. Now, they're significantly better than Missouri, which is still 129th at 499 yards a game. So this game is strength on strength and weakness on weakness. Missouri's offense versus A&M's defense, strength on strength. Missouri's defense versus A&M's offense, weakness on weakness. Rushing defense, where you'd expect A&M to be really good with that front, right? Well, they're not. They're 62nd in the country, giving up 144.3 yards a game. They give up almost as many rushing yards per game as they get themselves, which is, kind of interesting, especially since, again, most of those yards came, or not most, but like fully a third of Texas A&M's rushing yards on the season came in one game against Kent State. Another area where you'd think A&M is great because of that defensive front is tackles for loss, and they are pretty good. 42 tackles for loss, that's exactly 7 a game. That ranks 24th in the country. Missouri is down in the hundreds, allowing 6.33 yards or tackles for loss per game. And that kind of leads me into an interesting point that Eli Drinkwitz made earlier this week. He said he thinks the number one indicator of winning games in college football is not turnovers. It is explosive plays on offense. Who can make big plays? And kind of related to that, who can avoid negative plays? Missouri has done very poorly avoiding negative plays this year. They're giving up a lot, 6.3 tackles for loss per game, especially if you're giving those up on first down. That's putting you in a lot of 2nd and 12s, 3rd and 9s, things like that. And that's just not, it's not to say, of course, that's not a situation Missouri's offense excels in, because that's not a situation anybody's offense excels in. So, again, strength on strength, weakness on weakness. It's going to be interesting to see which of those things gives, because looking at the numbers, like, nothing should shock you in this game, right? 14-10 would shock you from the standpoint that Missouri's defense could hold anybody to 14 or to 10, but also A&M's offense isn't explosive. But the flip side is nobody would be that shocked with 42-38 because Missouri gives up points to everybody, and Missouri has also shown an ability to score, so there's a lot of things that could happen in this game. So Garrett Dolan says A&M will have 300 yards rushing. They could. Look, I'm not going to call you stupid for saying that. I mean, there's a lot of teams that have done that against Missouri. Missouri's giving up almost 300 yards a game on the ground, so it wouldn't be a shock if A&M manages to do that. Snoop saying, I'm giving you a little bit of hope. A bit is all that is warranted. I understand all the negativity. I truly do. And I understand what I'm telling you guys here is based probably more in theoretical hope than it is anything that you've seen on the field that should back that up. I've watched enough college football that I think it's not hard to see. My analysis of this is far more about A&M than it is about Missouri. Again, if A&M plays an A game, they're winning. If they play a B game, they're winning. If they play a C game, they very well might win unless Missouri plays an A game. So I get that. But I have just seen enough college football to not be surprised if A&M kind of comes in here and you're looking up in the third quarter and going, where's that team that beat Alabama? Because I don't see them on the field here. I think that, and that's again what this is based on. I mean, I understand the pessimism and the negativity about this Missouri team right now, but I think there's a shot that Missouri gets a flat A&M team. Robert hopes to see Beatty get some help today from some of the other backs. I've honestly kind of given up on that. I mean, yeah, Dawson Downing had a 70-yarder against North Texas. That's fine. Michael Cox had a 75-yarder against SEMO. That's fine. Elijah Young doesn't even play anymore at running back. B.J. Harris had a couple nice runs last week against North Texas, but I don't think if Missouri wins this game, it's going to be because Tyler Beatty got help. I think if Missouri wins this game, it's going to be because of Tyler Beatty, at least offensively. It's also going to have to be because the defense played better than we've seen so far. But I think if Missouri's going to get this done on offensively, it's on Tyler Beatty mostly. Dan says, at what point will you call for a new DC or a linebacker coaching change? Look, I am very honest about this, guys. I don't really call for firings. It's not my thing. I got to cover this team every day. I just don't. I don't think that's appropriate. If there is a coaching change, we will certainly, report it. We will follow up on it. We will give you all the reasons why, all that. I'm not going to call for Steve Wilks' job. Now, I also won't tell you that those people who are calling for it are without merit. Look, they've been terrible this year, and they've been worse than the talent says they should be. So anybody that thinks Steve Wilks should be fired, I get it. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I would personally give him the second half of the season and see what happens, because I don't know. I've said this over and over. I don't know what firing him now does that firing him 6 weeks from now doesn't do. So no issues. But, I think that I'd give him the second half of the season, and then, hey, he's got a 2-year contract. If Drinkwitz wants to go into next year with him, okay. Now, if they end the season giving up 295 rushing yards and 499 total yards a game, I would question the wisdom of going into next season with him. But I'm not going to pound the table and stomp up and down and cry for Steve Wilks to get fired. That's not my style. I don't think that's my job, to be quite honest with you. Snoop says no need to fire the defensive staff. The new DC will assemble his own. Yeah, if they bring in another defensive coordinator, that's certainly possible, right? If you're an assistant and a new coordinator comes in, especially in a situation where Eli Drinkwitz basically just kind of hands the defense to that DC, that's certainly a possibility. That could definitely happen. And now we are going to do what we always do on this show right about this time, and that is check in with Mitchell Forty, who I'm assuming by this point is in the Faroe Field press box. That accurate, Mitch?
That is accurate. I am here.
All right. Well, good deal. So, look, it's a perfect day in Columbia for football. I think it's going to be like 65 degrees, not many clouds, nice day. What did your walkover look like? I mean, everything around this tells me this should be the biggest crowd of the season.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. It seems like there's a lot of people out and about, especially for an 11 a.m. game. Good number of tailgaters, good amount of maroon as well. I think that'll help push the number of attendance up a little bit. Probably our biggest visiting crowd of the year. But yeah, beautiful day for football.
All right, so we always kind of check in with you for an injury report and all that. Any ability to tell yet, like who's out there for warm-ups, not out there for warm-ups among the guys we're not sure on?
Yeah, so right before I called you, the bulk of the team ran out there for warm-up, so I didn't have a chance to really go through everyone. I will do that, as soon as I get off the phone with you and post on the board who I can and can't for sure say is out. I can tell you that Bear Bannister was in street clothes. I spotted him pretty quickly.
Okay.
This looks like he will not play. Akil Byers and Darius Robinson are both out there. They were both listed as questionable. Darius Robinson, I think, has missed 3 or 4 games in a row, so that should be kind of nice to get him back out there. Case Cook is out there, and he was listed as questionable. I haven't gotten a chance to go through the rest of the list. Like, I know Cooper was listed as questionable. Haven't seen him, but also haven't seen him in street clothes, so I'll keep an eye out for him. Haven't seen Realist George, who's been, kind of MIA of late without much explanation, but I'm not going to promise yet that he's not out there. So, like I said, I will get that posted on the board as soon as I go through everybody. Okay, yeah, and to me, look, if you can run and you're not, quote, dealing with issues, you play in this game. Because I kind of let off this show saying, Missouri this week has a chance to do what A&M did last week. Not that beating A&M is the same as beating Alabama, but A&M turned the narrative around that team from this is one of the most disappointing teams in the country to, oh, my God, you beat Alabama. Missouri can kind of flip the narrative of its season with a win today. Not to, hey, you beat the best team in the country or anything, but at least from, man, this really feels hollow to, hey, there's some things to like here, and the second half might be better. Yeah, I think this has a feel to it kind of similar to that LSU game of last year, at least from an opportunity standpoint. That game they had played 2 SEC games and it didn't go well, and people were a little down. And obviously maybe not as down as this year because they knew it was the first year and going to be some rebuilding. But a third SEC game this year, 11 a.m. take-home game against a team that maybe we know is flawed, and we didn't know it as much going into that LSU game, but knew it by the end. That that team's flawed, but it's a big name and it's an opportunity to make a statement and show that this team's going to keep playing. There's reason to keep the faith in this coaching staff as they continue to get more talent in here. And I think the other similarity we're going to see is I think Mizzou's going to empty out the playbook like they did in that LSU game last year. I think we're going to see some non-quarterbacks throwing pads and stuff like that, some trickeration, some aggression. So, I'll be eager to see how it plays out.
So when I look at this, I mean, I just said a couple minutes ago, literally nothing in this game would surprise me because it's strength on strength and it's weakness on weakness. I mean, if you tell me that this is going to be a shootout because Missouri does empty the playbook on offense and they can't stop anybody on defense, I'm going to believe you. If you tell me it's actually kind of a low-scoring game because Missouri dinks and dunks and A&M actually isn't all that good on offense, that would surprise me more just because I have to see Missouri stop anybody to believe that. But, I mean, there's a wide range of variance in what could happen here.
Totally agree. I think the only thing that would surprise me is a Mizzou blowout win. I think if A&M comes out and plays like they did last week, I could see them winning by a bunch. If they come out, a little sluggish and hungover, I could see kind of a slog where either team wins a close game. I could also see a shootout where either team wins a close game. So, I think, the big variable, obviously, is just what Texas A&M team is going to show up,
Right.
I think we more or less know what we have from Missouri at this point. I mean, obviously, you don't want them to come out and play like Tennessee or else we know what's going to happen. Like, there's a little bit of a range of outcomes there. But I think this Missouri offense is going to be able to move the ball okay, and I think their defense is, probably going to struggle a little bit, especially if A&M is keying on cylinders early. I think if we get the A&M team from the first few weeks, that Missouri has a decent chance. If we get the A&M team we saw last week, it could get ugly pretty fast.
All right, we won't keep you too much longer, but a couple of questions from people watching. And Floyd Barber says, "What's to lead anyone to believe A&M won't average 10 yards a carry?" So here's, I think there's this reputation. A&M has talented running backs, and obviously Missouri's running defense has earned its reputation. But I looked at it. A&M has run for, if you take out 303 yards against Kent State, A&M averages 126 yards a game and like 4.5 a carry. Nothing about A&M's offense screams special. Now, I understand the defense they're playing, but I just expected to see something different based on what I had heard at the beginning of this week. I thought A&M was going to have this really good rushing attack, and the truth is they don't.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, their offensive line has really struggled for much of this season. They're starting multiple true freshmen on that offensive line, and that's been, part of their big issue on offense, aside from, having a quarterback get hurt and some injuries in their receiving core. But their offense has struggled because their offensive line has not been very good. Now, again, I mean, we've seen some pedestrian offensive lines be able to push Mizzou around at times this year. I mean, even with two freshmen,
last week,
probably still more talented than Central Michigan and North Texas. So, yeah, I get the skepticism. I get why people are kind of at the end of their patience with this Missouri defense. But I agree. It's not like you're playing, Tennessee, they came in, they were a good offense. Now, Mizzou played bad and had a bad scheme and everything was wrong. But, you come in expecting Tennessee to score points. A&M has really not done that very often this year. So, especially if they're, coming in a little sluggish, I don't think you necessarily say automatically this team's going to score 50 points and hand the ball off every play and be able to march down the field.
All right, so last thing, this is kind of we talked about, it's a prove-it game for Missouri. It's a show-up at some point Missouri defense game, but I think this is a chance for Connor Bazelak to really kind of shut some people up, right? He's not a Heisman Trophy winner, but he also shouldn't be in the list of top 8 to 10 things that we have an issue with, but we know that the quarterback always is. If Bazelak can come out, regardless of what the final score is, if he can come out and, move this team up and down the field and put up some numbers against A&M and maybe hit a couple deep balls, I wonder if at least for the rest of this season, people finally accept he's the starting quarterback on this team.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. We know that people like to, they don't like to change their opinions based on what they see on the field. They like to have their ideas and then kind of stick with it. But, yeah, I mean, I think that this is an opportunity for Connor Bazelak. I also think that if Mizzou's going to contend, he has to play well.
Yes.
Because this Texas A&M defensive front's really good. I don't see Missouri being able to run for 300 yards against them like they did last week or anything close to that. And I think that, obviously, if Missouri's going to win this game, I don't think they're going to win 13 to 10. They're going to have to score some points, and so I think it's going to fall on Connor Bazelak's shoulders to do that. And I think that Texas A&M's smart, coaching staff is smart, which I think Mike Elko is a good coach. He's going to say, all right, let's make Connor Bazelak beat us downfield. And the opportunity will probably be there for him to do that. So if he's able to do that, then I think Missouri has a better chance of winning this game, and he can impress some people.
All right, give me this game comes down to one thing. I kind of came down on the side of A&M is averaging 7 tackles a loss defensively, which is top 25 in the country. Missouri's giving up 6.3. Missouri's got to limit negative plays is to me the biggest, hey, can they stay in this game? What is it from your side?
Yeah, you probably stole mine. I really think that Mizzou's offensive line needs to play its best game of the season in order to win. But, on top of that, I think I'll just go down to Mizzou's got to start fast, I think. You've got an opportunity here with Texas A&M coming off this Alabama game, playing an 11 a.m. kick. Mizzou has dug itself into some early holes in this Power 5 competition this year. We talked about it on one of our shows this week. I mean, especially against Kentucky and Tennessee. They were down 14-0 to Kentucky, 28-3 to Tennessee, both in the first quarter. That can't happen. If you can get an early lead, I think Mizzou's best run defense in this game could just be game script. Say you get a 2-touchdown lead, now all of a sudden A&M can't hand the ball off every play, and your defense gets done a big favor there. So I think that would be huge.
All right, well, Mitch, appreciate it, man. We'll be following along all day long from Faurot Field. Enjoy it.
Sounds good, guys.
All right, Mitchell Forty live from the press box at Faurot Field. We always like to get the feeling from over there. Once again, according to Mitch, Barrett Bannister in street clothes, he's not going to play. Darius Robinson, Case Cook, and Akil Byers, all at least dressed out, came out for warm-ups. Not a guarantee they're going to play, but they are at least going through warm-ups, which Barrett Bannister appears not to be. So we will see how that goes. Real quick, we're going to wrap this thing up over the next 15 minutes or so, kind of looking around the SEC and then taking predictions from you guys. But before we do that, I do want to remind you one more time that this show every single week, pregame, is brought to you by the Call and Gentry Law Group down in Jefferson City. Their team can do personal injury, wrongful death, professional licensing, family law, mediation, criminal law, business litigation, corporate law, government relations and contracts, unfair wages and labor practices, litigation, appellate work, defense of window and door manufacturers, Missouri medical malpractice defense, and workers' comp. Those are just the things listed on their website. They can probably do other things for you. Go to callgentry.com. You can schedule a consultation online there, or you can give them a call during business hours at 573-691-4571, 573-691-4571. Thanks again to Call and Gentry Law Group for making this show possible and getting you guys set for kickoff every single Saturday of the Mizzou football season. So before we get to kind of answering your final questions and taking some predictions, I did want to take a look around the SEC real quick in this week. And let's start with the standings in the SEC. Georgia and Kentucky leading the way. I think it will be very difficult at this point for Georgia, Kentucky not to finish 1-2. The only way that happens, the only way anybody else can get into that top group, I think, is if Tennessee beats Kentucky, because Kentucky at 4-0 already has wins over Florida, Mizzou, and South Carolina. They're going to beat Vanderbilt, so they're going to be a minimum of 5-3, and they're going to have tiebreakers over pretty much everyone below them. Tennessee is the one exception there. Georgia and Kentucky play today at 2:30, and as unlikely as I think it is, if Kentucky wins this game, we're going to wake up tomorrow morning talking about Kentucky as a playoff team. I don't think it's going to happen. Georgia is favored by 23.5, which I think is too much. This Kentucky defense, Georgia's, the way they play, I think this is the week that, like, Georgia just kind of has a foot on the throat, like 30-13 win, right? Like 17, 20 points I can see. I just think 23.5 is a little too much. I think Kentucky's earned a little bit more respect than that. But I think today is basically the day that Georgia clinches the SEC East. I know they can't do it mathematically, but I think that's what we see today. Over in the West, Alabama, nobody's played 4 games in the West yet. Alabama's still technically on top because the only team that's beaten them is still a game behind them in the standings. Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State all sitting there at 1-1. Decent chance LSU finishes last in this division, which is insane. Decent chance Ed Orgeron isn't the LSU coach by Monday. We talked about that with Blake Topmeyer yesterday on our pick show a little bit. He's a columnist for USA Today, SEC columnist down in Baton Rouge covering that game. So there's the SEC West standings. A&M looking to get back to 2-2, and depending on what happens in Arkansas, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Auburn, like A&M could actually find itself in second or third place in this division by the end of the day, which would be interesting. And so let's now go ahead and take a look at that SEC schedule. Obviously, you know about Mizzou and A&M getting ready to go here in just 25 minutes from Columbia. 2 more early games, Auburn at Arkansas, Florida at LSU, both starting at 11. Those both pretty interesting games. Kentucky at Georgia, game of the day in the SEC. Vanderbilt at South Carolina, man. Ooh, yeah, that's happening. The night games, Alabama at Mississippi State. Alabama's favored by 17 in that game. You kind of expect the pissed off Tide to show up and make up for last week. And then I think the best game of the day, at least outside of Athens, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Knoxville at 6:30. Kind of glad that that's a night game, so I'll actually be able to watch most of that game, if not all of that game, after we finish up with our stuff here today. So pretty good slate in the SEC. All 14 teams in action, all 14 playing conference games. Which doesn't always happen. We usually get that like Missouri at North Texas exception or that non-conference clunker, but we don't have that this week. We've got 7 league games, everybody in action, so full day in the SEC ought to be a good time. So, all right, now I want to get back to Mizzou A&M. talk about this one, take some of your guys' questions and comments and all that. So let me catch up here. Snoop points out Bazelak 4th in the SEC in passing yards, 5th in passing yards per game. Again, Connor Bazelak's not perfect. I thought last week was one of his weaker games. Threw for 160, 41 of them, I think, on one play. But, he's not the problem with this team. Now, yes, if you put Cam Newton on this team, are they better? Sure. They're winning more games with Cam Newton at quarterback. He's not 2010 Cam Newton. But he's been fine. Now, I think those statistics are a little misleading in that Missouri has thrown the ball much more than it's run it, somewhere around 60, maybe 60+% of the plays this year. Also, they've been behind a lot. So they are racking up a lot of stats in that Kentucky game, in that BC game that ended up in losses. Now, I don't want to say those stats were meaningless because those were one-score games, but they are getting some passing numbers that maybe aren't completely reflective of the offense. Still, Bazelak, not the issue with this team. How soon should we expect the linebacker who transferred from Wyoming to be available? I don't know how realistic it is to expect Chuck Hicks to help. He didn't suit up last week. If he can come in and with 2 weeks prep be better than, be on the 2 deep, I think Missouri's linebacker play is maybe even worse than we think it is, and I think we already think it's pretty bad. Breakfast King says Bazelak's immobility plus the O-line plus Texas A&M D-line has me worried. Fair take. You got to see Connor Bazelak be able to get out of trouble and move the chains a few times in this game. I mean, you just have to. It's an element this offense has to have. Jared says, think Mizzou could be +4 on turnovers and still not keep this one close. It's possible. I think we're doing two things here. I think we're judging A&M too much on last week, which is, that's their ceiling. That's as well as they can play. I don't think they can do it again because they haven't done it again this time at any point this season. I think we're also still judging Missouri too much on the Tennessee game. That was Missouri's floor. I don't think they'll be that bad again. Now, A&M's a better team than Missouri. There's a reason they're a 9, 10-point favorite. But Missouri is better than its worst day, which we're judging it on. And A&M is not as good as its best day, which we are judging it on. So somewhere those two things have to come together a little bit, I think. I think that is likely, and I think that is why it's an 8-point line and, not an 18-point line. Justin just hopes Missouri can win the coin toss. If they do, I'd put the offense out there. No question. Dave Buck wants to know, without Bannister, who's the third down go-to wide receiver? I think it's Kiki Chisholm. And look, he's had some drops. I understand that. He's not Barrett Bannister, but he has been Missouri's most reliable kind of possession receiver. He's not a guy that's going to beat you deep a lot, but he can go over the middle and get you 8 yards. I think he's the third down guy. Cam wants to know, aside from Mike Maietti, who's a grad transfer, who's the last grad transfer that paid off for Missouri? I'm sure there is one, but I don't know. I mean, even Kelly Bryant obviously didn't go as planned. I'm sure they have one, but I don't know. Marcus Aurelius asked everybody, how many yards on the ground do you think A&M has? I think Missouri has to hold them under 200. That's the number for me. If they hold A&M under 200 rushing, I think Missouri has a chance. Now, will they? I don't know. They haven't really done it much this year. They held North Texas to 186, but then gave up 300 passing. So I think 200 is the number, in my opinion. Let's see. So, guys, I want you to go ahead and start throwing your predictions up in the comments, and we're going to get to those before we leave. Want to go back and make sure there were a couple other questions I missed, so I'm going to go back and hit those. And while I'm doing that, you throw up your predictions. We'll go another 4 or 5 minutes and get to them before we get out the door here. Cam says, what freshmen are likely to burn their red shirts this year? Obviously, Wingo and Lovett, maybe B.J. Harris. Yeah, I think B.J. Harris is headed for that. Arden Walker is a guy that I still think could. I don't necessarily think you need to, but I think he could. But yeah, I think B.J. Harris probably plays. He looked pretty clearly like the number 2 back last week. Now, Eli Drinkwood said the plan was to get Michael Cox more carries, and he got hurt, so that didn't end up happening. But I still think B.J. Harris ends up playing in at least 5 games. I'm going to take a minute to search, guys, for a comment here because I saw it, and it didn't work at the time, but I do want to get to it. So give me just a minute. Ron says he thinks there's a big day from Bazelak with some Jack Stack in him. Signed a NIL deal the other day. So, yeah, that'd be okay. Okay, Floyd the Barber. This is what I wanted to get to. Whoa, and I just made it way too big. So let's see if I can make this any smaller. I'm not sure what I have done with the comments here. But we're gonna see if we can make this a normal size. Okay, there you go. Floyd says, not to unload on you, but all the crystal balls on Luther are flipping to Georgia. If this happens, are we going to be saying it was because of the 62 Tennessee hung on us? So I want to say a couple things first, Floyd. I don't know. I've seen a couple crystal balls future casts, as Rivals calls them, from Georgia people. And I'm not, I'm not saying it's impossible Luther Burden ends up committing to Georgia on Tuesday. It certainly is possible. We have tried to be clear about that over the last few weeks. I've seen a couple Georgia people predict it. I don't tend to follow the crystal balls and the future casts all that much. I just don't care about them, especially from people that cover teams that aren't involved in the recruiting, right? I don't care if an Iowa State person or a Louisville person or an Oklahoma person predicts Luther Burden going to Georgia any more than I care if those people predict him going to Missouri. If he ends up at Georgia, is it because of the Tennessee game? Not really. It's because that's where he wanted to go, and they showed him something on his visit this weekend that pushed him over the top. Again, I said this yesterday on our site. Took some grief for it, but that's fine. I'm not putting in a prediction for Luther Burden. If I were to put one in, it would probably be for Missouri. But the reason I'm not doing it is because if I do that and it ends up wrong, even though everybody says it's just a prediction, we won't hold you to it. You will. You will. If I put in a prediction for Luther Burden to Missouri and it's wrong, I hear about that legitimately, not just for this year, like legitimately for years. Every time I would then put in a prediction, people would say, yeah, but you said Burden was coming here, so I don't care. So that's why I'm not doing it, unless I am 100% sure, and I am not 100% sure. Missouri has an excellent shot. As I wrote yesterday, if you talk to people from St. Louis, Luther Burden is going to commit to Missouri on Tuesday night. I just don't have anybody who I know knows saying that to the point where I'm comfortable saying it. But if he goes to Georgia, is it because of the Tennessee game? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure that didn't help. But no, I don't really think that's ultimately the reason. I mean, Georgia's a damn good program, favored to win the national title. I think it's got a lot more to do with that than about a single outcome. So let's run through some of your guys' predictions. And then I'll give you mine, and we will get out of here. Garrett says 45-21 A&M. I think that's kind of going to be the common theme here. I think that's what most people are going to think. T-Rise's prediction is just pain. Stewart predicts 42-38 Mizzou. Freeway JQ says 38-27 A&M. Dan just picks A&M to score 48. I don't know how many Missouri's going to have, but A&M will have 48. Jared says 56-20 A&M, and only because they take their foot off the gas. Breakfast King going A&M 44-30. Marcus going Mizzou 38-35. Dan followed up and said 48-24 A&M with the win. So let's finish up one more. Justin says 31-28 Missouri. So you guys, if you haven't read my prediction on the site, here is what it was. It was 33-27 A&M. I'm not going to pick Missouri to win this game. But as I've said, I think A&M comes in a little bit hungover, a little bit fat and happy, a little bit believing all they got to do is toss the ball out and they're going to win this game. I think Missouri comes in kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, looking at this as this is our one shot. If they lose this game, there's really nothing left that saves the season. I mean, it's you beat Vandy, you beat South Carolina. Okay, maybe you pull out Arkansas to get to 6-6 in a bowl game, but that I don't think so, by the way. But there's nothing left. After today, if you're sitting 3-4 after today, everybody kind of just looks away, I think, and focuses on basketball in a couple weeks, to be quite honest with you. So, and yes, there is a game against Georgia and a game against Florida left, but I'm kind of frankly writing those off. So I think Missouri comes out playing with nothing to lose. Eli Drinkwitz calls every play he's got. Steve Wilkes, maybe just blitzes his ever-loving tail off on defense. And I think they play well. I still don't know if that's enough to win, which is why I'm going A&M 33-27. I'm hedging bets a little bit here, right? But I think Missouri plays well. I think A&M is a little bit off. The question is that going to be enough for Missouri to get the win? As of right now, I'd say it probably isn't, to be quite honest with you. So that's where we're at. 14 minutes to kickoff. I want to remind you what we do after the game. Before you guys leave here, hit the like button. Also, subscribe to the channel, because what that's going to do when this game's over, it's going to be sometime around between 2:15 and 2:45 probably that this game ends. But we don't know exactly. So right after the game, I always kind of import some stats and change a few graphics and upload a few things. That takes me 5-10 minutes after the game's over, and then we immediately go live with the post-game show. While Mitchell and Joel are over at the stadium doing post-game, talking to Eli Drinkwitz and players, we're already going to be on the air with the post-game drink. So because we don't know exactly when that will be, if you subscribe to our channel, you're going to get a push notification, hey, Power Mizzou is live on YouTube with the post-game show. So all you're going to have to do is click on that button. You come in. We'll take your calls. We'll talk about it for a while, whatever happens. Blowout, upset, anything in between. We'll talk about it for as long as you guys want to talk about it after the game. Again, that ballpark is 2:30, but we don't know exactly. Could be a little earlier, could be a little later. So make sure you subscribe so you get that notification. One more time on the way out the door, thank the Call Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City, and remind you guys the two ways to get in touch with them. CallGentry.com to schedule a consultation online. 573-691-4571, the phone number, 573-691-4571. Talk to anybody down there, set up an appointment, get your consultation, figure out whatever legal issues you got going on. Colin Gentry makes this show possible every week. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us here on a Saturday morning, back in our customary 9:30 time slot before an 11 a.m. kickoff. We will be back to talk about it on the post-game drink afterwards. Enjoy the game, guys. See you then.